You don't need to memorize hundreds of color mixing recipes to be able to mix any color that you need. You also don't need to carry around with you a big book of color mixing charts. In fact, doing those things will only hold you back. Because the truth is, you cannot memorize all the possible colors that you might need. And there isn't a book that could ever be large enough to hold all the color mixing charts because there are just far too many. But what you can do is learn and understand how color works and how it functions together and the principles of color. Because when you do, then you can mix any color that your eye sees. And this is exactly what we're going to be going over in this video. We're going to be learning exactly how you can mix any color that you see. Now, we've all seen the color mixing charts that say, for example, mix X plus Y to get Z. And I think these are absolutely fantastic learning tools. I actually use them in my free download, my color mixing artist guide, which you can get in the description box below. I have a download link. And I also use them extensively in my color mixing master guide, which I'll also put in the description box below if you're interested in that. I think they're really, really great learning tools because with them, you can kind of get an understanding of how color functions together and what happens when you mix certain colors together. The problem is if you rely on this solely and really only look to these and you don't take what you learn from the color mixing charts and apply them to real life situations. So for example, let's say we're painting a leaf. It's a greenish color. So we mix together some yellow and blue to get a green. Then we need to lighten it. And so we mix in a little bit of white, and then we need to mute that color a little bit because we don't need a bright green color. We kind of need more of a natural green. We know the complementary color of green is red. So we mix in a little bit of red, it'll mute that just a little bit. Now we apply that color that we just mixed up to our painting, and now we compare, okay, the color on our painting to the leaf that we see in front of us, and it's very different. I know this is how many people's experiences with color mixing goes, and it also describes the difference between just using formulas for mixing color versus applying the knowledge that you gain from, let's say, a color wheel and color mixing charts to the problem-solving aspect of color mixing, which you can apply to all real-life situations. Now that example of mixing that color for the green leaf did not work because color is far more dynamic. We have to go through an investigation process of really figuring out what exact color that we need. Otherwise, we'll end up just painting the color that we think we see and not the color that we actually see with our eyes. Now, what does it mean that color is very dynamic? Let's take a look at this still life to kind of get a clearer understanding of that. So here we see a setup with a white base, blue background to the right, there's this red colored panel, then on the ground is this yellow cloth. So now the most obvious thing that stands out to us is how that red is being reflected onto the white vase. Then of course the blue is also playing a big role. We can see it more when we look at the back of the vase, but it is influencing this whole setup in more unobvious ways. It's being reflected in different areas. Then of course the yellow cloth is also being reflected onto the white vase. Now here we see how all these colors are interacting with one another. And this is always happening. Colors are constantly bouncing off of one another, always interacting. And this is something you need to take into consideration when mixing colors. And this is something that's true kind of in everything. If you think of yourself just in life with your friends, with your community, the people that you spend time with, they are influencing you and you are influencing them. And the same is true with color. And this is why color is very dynamic. So colors will change depending on what time of day it is, the type of lighting that colors are under, and also all the colors that are surrounding it or maybe not surrounding it. So a blue isn't just blue, a red isn't just red, but it might be a greenish, purplish, light muted blue, or perhaps a greenish red, or whatever it is. It's really important to deeply enjoy color mixing and really enjoy the process of investigating the color and how to get there, and really think outside the box, because you can't just think of a red as a red. It's much more dynamic and much richer than that. Now, I will share with you exactly what entails this investigation process to be able to mix up any color that you see. Now there are 3 steps that you need to go through to be able to mix up any color that you need. And step number 1 is absolutely the number 1 most important one. So you need to ask yourself, first thing, what value the color is that you are looking at and that you're trying to mix. This is always the first thing that you need to figure out. Now I'm going to show an example as I take you through these 3 stages of mixing up a color. So for stage number 1 here, we need to figure out the value of the right side of this face. So we're looking at this still life again, we are revisiting it, and we need to figure this out because that's next up on our painting here that we are working on. Now specifically, we're focusing on mixing the color here on the upper right side of the vase. So let's ask ourselves, what value is the color in comparison to the blue background? Now it is a little bit lighter in value in comparison to the blue, but it's also a little bit darker in value in comparison to the color spot that's directly to the left of it. That color spot that's in the upper middle part of the vase. Now it's really important to not figure out colors in isolation, but rather consider them in relation to the colors they are next to, just like we're doing here. There really is no other way to otherwise accurately figure out colors. Alright, so now on to mixing up the actual color. So again, we're really not concerned about the color itself here, but we're only concerned about getting the actual value to be correct. So the way I start this out here is I mix white with blue, ultramarine blue, and cadmium orange. And this helps me to create a darker color, but also make sure that it doesn't get too dark. You could also use earth tone colors if you would prefer. There really isn't a right or wrong way to go about it, especially at this stage, because we are just figuring out the value. We're not worried about color, just value. We then go ahead and check our mixture on the actual painting, and we notice that unfortunately it's a bit too dark in value. It's always important to check your color mixtures as you go through the process of figuring out a color. It's a constant trial and error. Now the colors that are lighter in value here are white and yellow, so go ahead and mix those into my mixture. Now we test out the color again, and the value is where it needs to be now. It is slightly lighter in value in comparison to the blue background, but darker in value in comparison to the middle left part of the vase. So now we are ready for step 2. Now step 2 in the color mixing process is all about figuring out color temperature. Now, if color temperature confuses you, let me know in the comment section below, and that will alert me that I should make a video about it. But color temperature is all about cool and warm colors and how cool or warm it is. Now let's take a look at the still life again and look at the color that we're mixing up. So here we see that right side of the vase, and we know and we can see that it's getting that red reflected from the panel. It is very warm in comparison to the blue background. That red is so warm. And of course, red colors are warmer than blue colors, so that kind of helps us to figure that out quite easily. And then we can see if we compare that right side of the vase to the middle part of the vase, it is also warmer than the middle part of the vase. It's not as obvious or clear as the background, but we can still see that it is warmer in temperature to the middle part. So it's very, very warm. So that leads and directs us into figuring out what colors that we need. So let's head to the palette. Now the warmest colors on my palette are red and orange, so I'm going to go after those here and go about mixing those colors in. Now the trick here though is to not make it look red or orange, but rather that it has a reflection of the degree of warmth of those colors. So we still need to make it look and feel white because this is a white vase. So that's why I'm mixing in small bits at a time so I don't overwhelm the color mixture. Now I test out the color on the painting and it's definitely warmer in temperature. However, it's a little bit too purplish at the moment. So I'm going to move on to step 3 because that is going to help us to nail this color. Step 2 and 3 can often be worked on simultaneously. So step 3 in the color mixing process is all about figuring out what color you're actually working with and how saturated or muted it is. So if we take a look again at the upper right side of the vase, we can see that it's kind of a reddish, muted, soft color that has pearlescent qualities to it. So it's not a dirty muted red, but it is more of a luminous red. So we can kind of err a little bit more on the saturated side with our red color. I grabbed some red to mix into my color mixture, but I also mix in some cadmium orange because the reddish color on the vase has an orangey quality to it as well. So again, this is where you can really lean into what colors you are seeing. Now we can test out our color after going through all 3 stages of the color mixing process. And we can see here how it fits in really well into the painting. It might look a little bit too red at first. However, as the painting continues, you'll see how it actually fits in quite well and looks very natural. Now this painting is not complete, but it gives you an idea of the direction that it's going. Now we've gone over the 3 stages of the color mixing process, but there is more. Before that though, let's do a quick recap. So step number 1 is all about figuring out the value of the color you're trying to mix, how light or dark it is. Step number 2 is figuring out the color temperature of the color, so how cool or warm it is. And step number 3 is figuring out what color it is and how muted or saturated it is. Now this next thing that I'm going to talk about and introduce is rarely talked about, but it really influences the outcome of your color mixtures. And that is transparent and opaque colors. Now there's a lot to unpack when it comes to transparent and opaque colors, but what I'm going to focus on here is how they affect color mixtures. Now there aren't just transparent or opaque colors, but there's a whole spectrum between the two. There are, of course, semi-transparent colors as well. And the way to know whether a paint tube is, whether a color I should say, is semi-transparent, transparent, or opaque is to look at the back of the tube. So as an example, here we have cadmium yellow on the left, Indian yellow in the middle, and then cerulean blue on the right. So if you look at the back, you can see how the cadmium yellow has this square that's kind of in the bottom middle part of the paint tube, and that means that it is opaque if it's filled in. It's completely filled in dark black. And then in the middle here, we have our Indian yellow, and that is empty. The square is completely empty and it's not filled in. That means it is a transparent color. And then our cerulean blue, unfortunately, it's a little marked up here, but you can see that it's just halfway, it's halfway filled in. So we have half of it's black and half of it is just blank. So that means it is a semi-transparent color. Now, 2 different paints that are very influential when it comes to transparent versus opaque colors are Kremnitz white versus titanium white. Now, Kremnitz white is a transparent white. However, it's also made with lead, so you do need to be a bit careful when using it, while titanium white is a bit less toxic. However, Kremnitz white is amazing because it allows you to create more nuanced color mixtures. Because it is more transparent, it kind of influences and affects the colors a little bit less. You can lighten something without making it chalky or kind of taking away from the vibrancy and richness of the color. While titanium white is very strong and it has its, of course, many benefits, but it's very strong and it's kind of like hitting a color really hard. You can lighten it very easily, but then it can also easily, you can take away the kind of the richness of the color. So I often actually start my paintings with titanium white, build it up with that first, and then I go into using Kremnitz white because it allows me to create more nuanced color mixtures and kind of get more of the richness of the color. Now, another example of this is Yellow Lake versus Cadmium Yellow. Now, Yellow Lake is a transparent color, while Cadmium Yellow is an opaque color. So now, if we were to mix, let's say, Cadmium Yellow into Ivory Black, it would lighten the color quite a bit and making it kind of more like greenish, lighter, chalky color. But if we were to mix Yellow Lake into Ivory Black, we would get a more kind of a rich, sort of greenish color. It might lighten it just a little bit, but not nearly as much as the Cadmium Yellow. We'll get kind of, again, a more richer color. Now, of course, all this depends upon what your goals are. Maybe your goal is to lighten the ivory black and get it to kind of look a little bit more greenish, chalky, lighter. If that's your goal, then of course you would want to use cadmium yellow. But if that isn't the case and you want more of that richer color, then of course the transparent color is the way to go. Now, I really encourage you to start taking these things into account because painting is all about nuance, and the more you understand about color, the further you will be able to go. Now, to get a really good basic understanding of color, I have a free color mixing starters guide, which you can check out in the description box below. I have a link for it there. And if you're ready to take it a step further and really get a deep understanding of how color works and how to apply it to any kind of situation, I have a color mixing master guide, which you can also check out in the description box below. This will really help you to apply color to any kind of situation, to be able to mix any color that you need, because once you understand color and how it works, you can seriously mix any color that your eye sees. Please like this video and subscribe if you haven't yet. It would mean the world to me. And leave a comment below if you have any questions at all or just like to say hi. I love hearing from you. I'll see you in the next video.